I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Adoption, immigration, and deportation. These are real concerns that have come up recently. And we're going to have our returning guest, Michelle M. Hughes, who is an attorney with Bridge Communications in Chicago. And we have known each other for a number of years and have discussed different issues, particularly interracial families, mixed race adoption, interracial adoption, all these things in which families have the need to be trained on how to deal with the cultural and racial differences of the children that they may be adopting. But one of the fears that has come up has been the aspect of the immigration issue with children who are born here, but whose parents or grandparents might not be documented. And we have a phone call coming in. Let me, sorry about that. And so what we are discussing is that these are real concerns. We have a friend who actually had been deported, even though his son was born here. Somehow the police hunted this young man down and deported him out of the country, though he had been living here 17 years. They found some little flimsy thing on him that he had a record. I think it was like a speeding ticket or something that was not this major problem, but he was deported from his family. There was a training done by the Covenant Church where they were training people on how to deal with deportation issues of some of their members of their church who may not be documented, and what to do if any of the officials came storming into your church. I had a friend who said, oh no, they're not doing that. But actually, some of these concerns are real, and people need to be ready to know, what do you do when you are accosted by authorities seeking to disrupt your family? So we're going to discuss these issues, and we're going to discuss them in a way that's going to help people not be fearful or, feeling ill at ease over how things are going to be handled. We need to have a real perspective. And so we're going to have our guest, Michelle M. Hughes, who is a lawyer who has dealt with immigration issues, with interracial adoptions, and with the real sense of knowing, what do we do when we are approached in this manner?
Yes.
There you are.
I just want to say I am not an immigration attorney. I am an adoption attorney.
Right.
So immigration issues touch on a lot of adoption issues, but I defer to the immigration attorneys for immigration advice.
Well, one of the things that a lot of people are concerned about when it comes to the whole immigration issue is, what if you have a child who has been adopted, and what if there are issues in the family, such as maybe either whether they're in foster care or whatever, but the caretaker, the parent, the foster parent, adopted parent, or whatever, is maybe undocumented or something like that. And what happens to that child if their household is disrupted?
That is a huge issue. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks in meetings on this. It really depends a lot upon your state law. In our state, undocumented people can actually adopt. In other states, they can't. But honestly, I think it depends upon your judge, right? We don't ask the questions, generally speaking, about whether you're undocumented or not, or whether you have legal status. but it can come up. The example that was given earlier about a speeding ticket, one of the reasons that I'm finding out that clients are undocumented, which I would never know because it's not something I would ask, but one of the reasons I'm finding out is because a lot of undocumented people drove without a license because they couldn't get a license. And in our state, you can now, but in other states, you can't. So if you're driving and you don't have a license, eventually you get pulled over and you get arrested for driving or get a ticket for driving without a license, which puts you into the system. Traditionally, it's never made a difference. And if you were undocumented, you were able to adopt in certain circumstances. The circumstances in my state that I've seen it is usually like step parent adoptions, where somebody has married someone and it's their kid, and they may have married someone who's now undocumented, then the stepdad adopts. Or in the case of foster care adoptions, our foster care actually provides that they will place kids with kin or fictive kin who's undocumented. So some of the more recent cases I've seen, and it's pretty typical, is that the mom or dad have something happens that gets DCFS to take their child from them, and they themselves may be a citizen. They may have been born here and their kids are born here. But when their kid is taken into the system looks for, where do I place the kid? And in general, almost everybody thinks that kin is better as long as it's safe, right? And so what do? You call grandma. Now, grandma may have been here for 30 years, 35 years, undocumented, never been an issue, right? So they place the kid with grandma. They may have placed the kid with grandma 4 years ago. So now the kid has been with grandma for 4 years, is bonded with grandma, knows grandma, life has been going normal. And 6 weeks ago, everything goes right, because now there's this possibility that ICE could show up and take grandma away because grandma's undocumented. The kid's not undocumented. Maybe even mom isn't undocumented, but grandma's undocumented. So I think different states are dealing with this differently. I will tell you that one of the things that has come out of my court system after many meetings is that we are starting to require a plan, because in every adoption, there's a report that's issue about why this person should be able to adopt, right? And so my court is actually issuing, they want to know there's a plan if for some reason a parent cannot parent. And it's going, at this point, it's expanded to everything. So it doesn't really make a difference anymore that ICE picks you up. They want to know there's a plan in place if you have, if you drop over and have a stroke, if you get in a car accident, if anything happens, they now want to be assured that when parents are adopting, that they have a backup plan, which truthfully makes sense for every parent. So they're not getting very specific to the immigration issue, but they are getting specific to, we want a plan as parents. If you're unable to do it, what's the plan? And as I also serve as a guardian ad litem, it's a big issue for me that there is a specific plan specifically for kids who are young or nonverbal. I don't really care about the 15-year-old because, as you all know, every single 15-year-old has a smartphone. And if they get dropped, come home from school, and mom and dad, whatever, have been picked up by ICE, they're going to get on the phone and they're going to call whoever the backup person is, and there will be a plan that they can implement because they're 15 with a smartphone, right? But if you're 7 and you get dropped off the bus and you walk to the end of the block and you put your key in the door and mom isn't there to greet you this time, what does the 7-year-old do? And we don't even have landlines anymore. So it's not like the 7-year-old can go and call 911 and DCFS will be notified. They are literally there all by themselves. And this would be true for little kids. Usually get shipped around by much more protection. But the 7-year-old, I worry about that 7-year-old because they're in that in-between stage. Like a 2-year-old, you're going to literally carry from point A to point B because they're 2, right? And a 15-year-old has a smartphone. Well, what about the 7-year-old who's not smartphone ready yet?
Yeah, I want to ask about some of this. Yeah, you did make a point, and this is why I will always have a landline. Um, but one of the things that Tom Honan had, who is the new uh, immigration fascist, I suppose. I'm not sure what his real title is, but he had said something about, well, don't worry about breaking up families. We'll just deport whole families. So he's talking about deporting people, even if they are here legally, because if there's someone in their family, which has caused a lot more panic in neighborhoods and in communities where people have are in families where there is mixed immigration status.
Yeah.
So when you see where the laws are changing so rapidly, and I understand what you say, that it does vary from state to state. Here in Massachusetts, we also, I believe, uh, finally can grant licenses to people who are not here, who are undocumented. I don't like to say people are here illegally, because technically, if you're not indigenous, we're all here illegally. But that makes a difference in where how ICE can keep track of you in some ways, but they can always look for a reason. Speeding ticket, you ran a red light, unpaid parking ticket, anything when things get bad, because remember, it's only been a month and a half and things are getting very bad very quickly. So when you have these mixed status families, who do you think, or who do you advise to look for those children, who to take over those children or have a plan for those children who may be born here and are citizens? They don't want to be, well, some of them, if they're 7, 8 years old, they may want to be deported with their parents. But what are some of the steps that you have to, or that a family should do before it gets to that? Because the panic and the chances of them being snatched up are real.
I think it depends upon who's undocumented, right? So let's say mom's undocumented and dad is not undocumented and he has the right to be here, then the kid doesn't need to really worry, because the kid will go with dad unless dad decides to, get on a plane and go with mom, right? But when you have both parents who are undocumented, or you have a single parent who's undocumented, I think that the parent has to make a plan ahead of time with the child of what happens if I'm not here when you get home, right? And that might be calling a family member who is actually documented or is a citizen. That might be calling a neighbor. That might be calling DCFS, worst case scenario. It may be that you're like, hey, I need to have this kid show up wherever I'm getting deported to. But we also have seen that they're not necessarily sending people back to the country they came from. And they're not necessarily sending people to, some people are ending up in, there's a report that some people are in some prison in the middle of Panama, right? So clearly you don't want to send a 7-year-old with that person who just got deported to this prison in the middle of Panama. So I think it depends where they're deported. So you need to have levels, and you need to, if your kid is too young, you need to have a person, a human being, whether that be a neighbor, a boyfriend, DCFS, social worker, somebody who knows how to implement the plan. What if I'm not there? right? And you have to have that discussion. Now, if you have an older kid, if you have a teenager, you have the discussion with the teenager. As long as there's somebody who is a citizen and or a permanent resident, you should be able to move that child from point A to point B, right?
What's the role of sanctuary cities?
In the end, sanctuary cities is all about that the police are not going to interrogate people or arrest people for being undocumented. But ICE can show up in a sanctuary city just as simply as it can show up in a non-sanctuary city. Right. Yes. Sanctuary cities, basically the local government has said, we're not going to help you. They can't stop them, but we're not going to say, hey, here, we're handing over people, with the exception of maybe New York City. We'll have to see how that goes. Right. But I don't think the sanctuary city really helps in the sense of protecting people, except that the general feeling or the culture of the city is that we are not going to share stuff. But as all of these as the local police computer systems get linked up with the FBI computer system that gets linked up with the Illinois state computer system, even if the police arrest you and don't turn you over to ICE, you're now in the system because they had to enter all your information into the system. Right. And so because of technology, I think it's going to connect people also, to be honest.
So are people having these conversations with their families, their neighbors? Well, this is what to do if they come and get me, or I want you to keep my child, or this is who you call. I mean, has this been a thing where families have had to have these conversations of the emergency plan? That's one thing. And then the other thing, what flashed in my mind was like back in the day, the fugitive slave laws and stuff like that. If people hide somebody in their house that might be being searched out to be deported, could they get arrested? And have there been cases that you may know of where people who tried to help in shielding them were then arrested or charged or whatever? Is that a thing that's happening?
So to my knowledge, I don't know of any laws on the books that has been a case yet. Do I think that could happen in the future? Absolutely. Right. And they have been removing the protections. Like it used to be, they didn't go into churches, they didn't go into schools, right? And now they are actually saying, hey, we're just going to go into churches and we're going to go into schools. And I'm very concerned also, like if you go into a school and you drag a kid out, what about the other 28 kids sitting in the chair? What type of trauma are you causing those kids in addition to the kid that you're dragging out? You've actually now traumatized 29 kids and 29 families, not just one, right? But to my knowledge, they have not implemented any type of law that doesn't allow you to protect someone, and you have the ability to not let someone in to search your house. Do I think that could change? Sure. And we can go back to Nazi Germany, right?
Absolutely.
And in Nazi Germany, you could get in trouble for hiding somebody. So it is entirely possible that it will change that way. With regards, are families actually starting to talk to kids and make plans? From my understanding, they are. In the process of everything that's come up in adoption court, I have talked to some lawyers who actually work with volunteer services that work with families with plans. And so there's stuff online that actually talks about how you do a plan and how you talk to your kids. And so I have seen some of that stuff. Now, how far that's getting out into the world, that question I can't answer. I know that my child goes to Chicago Public School, and I get emails on a regular basis just because I'm in the Chicago Public School system. And so I definitely get emails from the school system about places that you can go to get help for certain situations. And so I assume that, I don't need to use them, so I haven't used the services, but I assume that if a parent gets in contact with that they have these plans of what do you do with regards to this. And they're also, I understand they're spending a lot of time documenting, I suspect more so with little kids, but documenting who are the alternative caregivers. I mean, we've always, as a parent, had to put down who else can pick my kid up from school.
Right.
But from what I understand, the school systems, and I assume it's more than just my school system, which is, I think, the third largest school system in the country, but many school systems are actually like, okay, first choice, second choice, third choice. We need to know who we call, right?
Mhm.
We got a kid here and nobody's coming to pick up this kid. So they're actually implementing, and it may be being fueled by the immigration issue, but it frankly helps everybody. And they're not focusing on necessarily whether someone's documented or undocumented. They're making sure that all parents have filled out that paperwork, where in the past, if you didn't fill it out, they weren't hunting you down. They're hunting you down now, is basically, you have to fill it out.
Yeah.
So I think that there are institutions that are also working to help implement this and make sure that it has to be done. But to what degree? I mean, if I'm a mom that is, doesn't leave my house, and I do some type of remote work or whatever, and it's just my kid that comes and goes, I don't know how much I know unless I'm actually, I mean, maybe I have a lot of friends that I'm on the phone with or I'm on the internet with, but maybe I don't. I remember reading an article last year, and in Chicago, we have a lot of undocumented seniors, which is a whole different issue.
Mm.
And like 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds. And because they can't get Social Security or any other services, they were talking about how these people have to literally work until they drop, and or they better have kids who are able to take care of them. So that also will be really interesting how this plays out too. What if your kid's undocumented too? Maybe your grandkid isn't, but your kid is undocumented. So what happens if the kid who's, let's say you're in your 80s, your kid's in their 50s, both they don't get the 80-year-old, but they get the 50-year-old. So does this mean now that the 20-year-old has to take care of the 80-year-old?
Well, have there been situations, as far as you know, where, because I'm sure there are a lot of seniors that are undocumented, things were different maybe 50 years ago, whenever they came. They might have been some of those workers that were under the radar and paid low paid jobs, because who are you going to complain to? So there's a lot of those people. There's a lot of that workforce here. So what happens if somebody's 80 years old, past retirement, being taken care of by their children, and maybe they're the alternative caregiver when the parents are out working and you got the underage child? So how does a family like that deal with it if there is, maybe like you say, that adult who's also kind of taking care of the elderly parent may happen to be undocumented and removed from the house? That would put things pretty much in shambles. What's the plan for situations like that?
And
I have no idea, to be honest. I would hope that they're talking to the next generation, but maybe there isn't a next generation. Then what do you do? And the 80-year-olds, I mean, one of the things that was interesting in the article in the Chicago Tribune was that they get to a point, we think that people can work forever, but people can't work forever. And a lot of people are doing, they've done labor their whole life. And so those knees give out, those hips give out, and you can't actually physically do the labor. So you have to have somebody take care of you. And so if that child that is taking care of you is deported, I mean, I suppose you could ask to be deported. But I don't know. I mean, some of those people will probably be found in an apartment building when they don't pay the rent.
Mm.
I wanted to say
Honestly.
also that what I'm sure a lot of people are finding out is that they are not documented, and they may not know that, like you said, the 78-year-old who's, you know,
Retired.
or trying to retire, and the 50-year-old or even the 40-year-old, sometimes they are not, you
Yep.
just take it for granted, and you don't find out that you were not born here until you go for either Social Security or you go for something, and then you find out. Like sometimes it happens when kids go to apply to college, or sometimes it's later on in their life and they realize, wait a minute, what do you mean I'm not a citizen? And
Well,
so,
it's a big issue in the adoption community because a lot of international adoptees. So there was a law called the Citizenship Act of 2000. So for the most part, every kid that came into the country after 2000 was automatically a citizen, unless they came in on an IH4 or an IR4 visa and some other weird visas that rarely happens. If they came in on those visas, then they weren't covered by the Citizenship Act and they had to do additional stuff, right? One of the things they had to do was actually go into court and do an adoption. So you didn't actually have to do that if you came in on an IR3 or an IR or an IH3. So basically we said if you come in a 3, you're free. If you come in a 4, you have more to do, right? Well, adoption lawyers are getting these frantic calls from people who came in on 4s and either didn't do the adoption or they did the adoption, but then they didn't follow through and update with a certificate of citizenship, which then changes your information in the Social Security office. You can change it. And so these kids have a permanent residency card that has expired. Right? Even though if the adoption already occurred, they're technically a citizen, but they never did the paperwork, right? And I forgot what I was just reading. I was reading something the other day about, they're going to make it that if you're over the age of 14, you have to report if you were here on a green card or not, or if you're undocumented, right? So they will be able to catch some of these kids who were brought in for adoption over that are in that 14 and older range, that the paperwork wasn't finished. But here's the other thing. Before 2000, if you were an international adoptee, you had to actually get naturalized in order to become a citizen. There's rough estimates that 30 to 40,000 kids who are now somewhere between the ages of 30 and 70, roughly, are undocumented. They are not naturalized citizens, but because they came here in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? They went to school, they went to college, they have a social security number. They think they're legal. There has been kids, or I call them kids, but some are more older than me, but they're adults, and they get in trouble with the law, and they've been deported, even though they've been here since they were 3 and they've never known any other country. There have been people. There was a woman who voted because she was an adoptee. She thought she was a citizen. She went in to vote, and then they charged her with voter fraud.
Ooh.
Right?
yes.
Which is deportable. And so there's all these adoptees who are basically living in the shadows because their parents did not naturalize them in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And you also have these adoptees who are they have become disenfranchised with their parents for whatever reason. Maybe it's the adoptee's fault. Maybe it's the parents' fault. Maybe the parents have died. Whatever the case, they are no longer talking to their parents, right? Guess who has the paperwork? How do you go about getting the paperwork to even try and fix the problem if it can be fixed, if you're not talking to your parents and you haven't talked to your parents in 10 years?
Wow.
Right? So this is part of what's going on in the adoption community, that there are all these adoptees, some of them who've lived here for 50 years, came over here when they were 1 year old. They don't know they're a citizen, or they know they're not, but they can't fix it because, it could be fixed when they were a child. All the adoptive parents, if you got minors, you can pretty much fix it. There's a few exceptions to the rule, but basically you could do the paperwork with an immigration attorney to get done whatever you need to get done if your kid is under the age of 18.
Mm.
Definitely if your kid is under the age of 16, right?
Oh,
But if your kid is now 32, they're an adult. So
but
you can't necessarily fix the problem you should have fixed 16 years ago,
mm. Well, we're going to
right?
take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to find out more about what people can do now that the situation is the way it is, and what are some things that lawyers perhaps can help families with so that they're not traumatized by the sudden absence of a key family member. And what do you see is going to happen as a result of this in the future? What do we see is going to manifest in the country? What, just some ideas of what we think could happen as a result of these policies.
And
So,
also there's church protections. Naima, I just emailed you the if you can pull that up when we come back, the program that was instituted by the Evangelical Covenant Church in Chicago, where they sent out a training on what to do when ICE invades your church space and how you are protected, how you and your family are protected by this. So maybe you can pull that up also on the side.
all right. Well, let's take a look at it. But we'll be right back after this quick message. So stick and stay. Don't stray away. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I like that.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
And in case you didn't notice the resemblance, we're also three sisters.
We're going to be coming to you every week, sharing our successes and our mistakes as we navigate our lives as moms, wives, sisters, daughters, and of course, Black women in today's world.
We'll talk about it all: race, politics, religion, economics, culture, and we'll take a look at everything from whether or not to use corporal punishment to how do you teach your children about sex.
Look for our upcoming book, Growing Up Charles. It's a personal story about our lives growing up in Maple Park on Chicago's South Side. I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms. Follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Three Black Moms.
All righty. Well, we are back. So, Barbara, you want to tell us a little bit about the document, and we'll pull it up on the screen. And
Yes, this is covering the Fourth Amendment rights of citizens. Part of this article talks about what to do if you are detained by ICE. It has a big selection what to do if a congregant is detained by ICE and you're in church, or they come in and they're looking for you. They give you responses on what things to say, what things you are not obligated to disclose, and a lot of the safety measures that you have. They're talking, this article, this document talks about the Fourth Amendment protections and immigrant enforcement in churches, where you have a right not to disclose personal information about yourself or your families, and to avoid the trauma of someone just coming into your place of safety that you are feeling you're supposed to be being safe, and hauling you off with all kinds of detainment issues, family separation problems, and those kind of things that actually are illegal behaviors. And so it discusses a great deal of what to do. I don't know what the letters stand for. It's CHET, CHET, and recent selected immigration enforcement changes and church protections. Uh, so I had a friend who said they're not running into churches and snatching people. But obviously, the reason for this training and letting people be aware of perhaps any kind of thing happening is a result of there being not just a fear, but a real concern that people's lives will be disrupted by, it's like illegal search and seizure procedures, like when you're pulled over and you are not obligated to open your trunk if they ask you or answer any questions. You can do what is the right thing to do in terms of answering simple questions. But I think the document explains how much you need to tell and how much you really don't have to.
So I think that's something that a lot of churches probably, I don't know if the covenant churches you're talking about, I don't know if they are reaching out beyond,
Well, this training, it was for all churches in the country. This was just something that it came out about a month ago. And they sent me a copy of the actual training and that is included in this document. It's in Spanish, but then you also have it being interpreted as the person who is giving the instructions of what to do, where to go, where your help is, and what your real protections are, so that people can understand that this is a family issue, a safety issue, a protection issue.
Even though a lot of this was predicated on the sudden surge and the great surge of Spanish speaking immigrants, I think this is hitting a lot of other communities that come from other countries that may not be Spanish speaking. And so I don't know to what degree they have been affected by this sudden focus on who's documented and who's not. But the whole surge of immigrants from Venezuela, people fleeing the country, things happening in Venezuela that a lot of Americans aren't even aware of. Why are people fleeing here? What's happening there? What's happening with the gang violence and all that people left in the first place? And what was America's participation in destabilizing that country? It's a lot of things that happen in other countries that America might even be partially responsible for, but involved in instigating. Who knows? There's always a follow the money. There's always an economic incentive whenever Americans are involved in something, but the average citizen does not know the backstory. So all they know is the result of when people show up, and then you have business people that want to hire people for lower wages, and they know they can hire somebody who's not documented and pay them less, and they won't say anything because if so, they could be deported. So that's the dynamic that's been happening for a long time, where you have a lot of businesses or maybe even private citizens, hiring people that were not documented, and other people saying, well, they're taking our jobs. Well, maybe they're not. Maybe they're working jobs you never would have worked because you wouldn't accept that kind of pay. Who knows? But the panic, I think, came from the idea that there are people coming here, they're going to take our jobs and we need to get them out, or they're going to commit crimes, and our families are not safe. So that is the panic that led to a lot of support for the current administration's policies. And how do you address the fears that people have of that?
Yes, there's a lot of mongering, but I want to just say, let us be clear. There are a lot of people who are here undocumented who are white. They are not going after them. That is why that if you speak Spanish, even in a public place, you can be detained as possibly being illegal. And this happened, I believe, in Wisconsin, where these two women were speaking Spanish and they were caught up and they were Puerto Rican. And as we well know, Puerto Ricans are Americans. And they were taken to a detention center. When they were finally released, they weren't taken back to where they were. They had to find their own way home. But for a long time, they were not even listened to. And this is the thing is that they are looking and I live in a very heavily Spanish speaking community right where I live now. And I believe that that is where I haven't seen ICE here, although there's always rumors, but I haven't seen it here. But I know that there are fears because they are looking for brown people and they are looking for the Haitians and they are looking for other people. They're looking for folks of color. They're looking for black and brown people. They are not looking in little Ukraine in Chicago or any of these others. They are not looking for the people who are maybe here from Greece or Ireland or any place else and are not documented. So we need to be intentional about when we talk about these communities because the community, the just like DEI is actually now code and a dog whistle for anti-black. All of this anti-immigration and deportation is about anti-Spanish speaking people.
I think it's about anti-brown people,
I,
not just Spanish-speaking people. And to add to your point, they have also been arresting Native Americans
yes,
for by ICE as not being citizens, even though indigenous people, of course, are the original people here, right?
Yeah.
So they're clearly racial profiling in how they're finding people, which means this really puts every person who's black and brown at risk because
yes,
how do they know whether we're a Haitian or we're a Venezuelan or we're a Nigerian or that is undocumented, right? Because
right.
they're looking at anyone who doesn't look white.
That's
That's
exactly
what they're looking at, right? And so I think that whether you are a citizen or not, if you happen to be black or brown, that you really need to be thinking about how do I protect myself, if this should come upon me, right? Or to protect my kid. So I have been very clear. I am a mother of a teenage boy who does not have a driver's license because he's not old enough yet. But when I got his passport, I also got him a passport card because it's
yes.
wallet size and he can carry it in his wallet. And why, I would like him to be that brave soul who refuses to be searched. I also want him to be safe and I want him to be able to whip out the card and say, no, here I am. I'm definitely a citizen, right? Because how do I know they're not going to stop my child? He was born here, but
Yes.
how do I know? Because he's definitely a brown skinned boy.
And yeah, exactly. And this is the thing is that they're coming from all of us. I mean, the three of us have dreadlocks. They could say we're here illegally. And it's going back to those slave times where you had to carry your papers. I
Yep.
mean, we're talking about, I just ordered myself and got a new social security card because who knows whatever happened to my other one, but I'm not going to carry that with me. I have a real ID. I'm not going to carry my passport with me, but we all need to have something. And I'm glad, Michelle, that you brought up the passport card. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because not everybody has a passport. What is the difference and how do you get one?
Okay, so you get a passport card the same way you would get a passport. You have to apply for it from the federal government, right? Go to the post office. I tend to always go to the courthouse because that's I go to the courthouse anyway, so that's where I get mine from. The passport card, you can order it separately, but I just ordered it in addition to the passport, and it's like an extra $10 or $15. I don't remember what it was. And if you are getting a passport, you literally on the form check passport and passport card and pay the extra $15, and you will get it with your passport. I don't like to carry my passport around because it's big, it's bulky. I mean, I know it's not that big, but I'm not carrying that thing around. Plus, I don't want to lose that. So the
Right.
passport card is literally the same size as a credit card, your driver's license, and you can keep it as ID. Now, from a practical standpoint, if you're crossing country lines, if you're flying, you must have a passport. But the passport card came into place, from what my understanding is, to go to like Mexico or Canada, because you can drive across the border. So the card works for driving across the border, but if you're going to fly into a country, you have to have a passport. So to me, it makes sense to have a passport anyway. And I can tell you, I mean, I'm having real conversations with a whole lot of people about what happens if you have to leave this country. And if you have to leave this country, you better have a passport so you can get out quickly. And I'm also want to throw this out to you. So if they, we have now so many crops across this country just rotting in the fields because there are not people to pick them, or the people are too scared to come pick the crops now, right? So who is going to replace these people if they deport them? What is the plan to replace these people if they deport them? We're not, there is a plan. And
Okay,
people need to start thinking about what that plan is.
Okay, MAGA folks, those are those jobs you wanted. Go get them.
Yeah, I don't think that's what their plan is for the MAGA folks.
To pick apples off trees and oranges and berries and everything.
Well, I heard
jobs you wanted.
I heard one of the things they're planning to get rid of Section 8.
Right? Yeah, it is happening. There have been people that I know of that they've said, the landlord where they were living said, we don't have the money for your rent anymore. You'll have to move because you're no longer covered. So that right. is happening.
Well, so if they get rid of all the food stamps or reduce them to some ridiculous, amount, and they get rid of all the public housing, right? In Section 8 is basically subsidized public housing, right? Where are these people going to go? Now, we have crops that need to be picked and people that they're going to mandate, if you want anything from us, you have to work. Put it together, people.
Well, and they are building internment camps, on the southern border. And so when they incarcerate you, because it is incarceration, and then there you have your free labor, just like they have for the carceral system for black people right now. They are looking for a way of getting people to work for free.
So now they're doing that in the Alabama prisons already.
Oh yeah, they're doing it all in all prisons. Prisons have always been. I mean, that was always the continuation of the slave labor of the prisons. That's why they had vagrancy laws and all of that. The whole thing was to create a workforce that worked for free, because that's what a large part of the country was built on, that free labor that worked in the fields for very little money. So now that we see this is happening and we see the game plan, what we have to do is be smarter and have another game plan, because the whole economy is going to collapse based on what you just said, the food rotting and everything. They already got these ridiculous prices for eggs. What they say was the reason that bird flu or whatever. Anyway, they're going to come up with some reason why everything is.
But the whole bird flu thing isn't even true. I'm trying to remember exactly who told me that they were instructed to kill all their chickens and their chickens were not ill.
Now that's scary. Yeah. But, creating.
Well, they said that our policy in the United States is if it's some birds in a particular, area
Yeah.
have bird flu, you kill all the birds in the entire area, which other countries don't necessarily do. But bird flu is there, and it's jumping to different species,
Yes. Which
and there has been a human death. And at the same time, they are not reporting on it. So we don't really have an idea how dangerous this may or may not be.
Or you can let the birds go free and get them away from your land and let them go ahead and have their own families and leave them alone and, eat fruits and vegetables or whatever the case may be. But, you don't have to kill something just because you can't eat it. Does that really make any
Yeah,
sense?
but birds are, I mean, I've seen birds in Chicago. They found a eagle, a bald eagle that died of bird flu here.
yeah.
So it is jumping, and then they also have found that they did a study of veterinarians who had been working with large animals, mostly cows and stuff like that. They didn't even know they had it, but there was a percentage of them that had the bird flu. So this stuff is jumping, and how it's going to affect different people. I don't know the answer to that. I went to law school, I didn't go to medical school, but I
would
think
make
it's
a
a bigger
suggestion.
issue that we are
I would make a
talking about.
suggestion. I think the suggestion for us to really get some answers is to follow the money. Who is benefiting from whatever suddenly pops up, whether it's a sudden flu, a sudden pandemic, a sudden sickness? Who's getting paid? Because that will let you know who created the problem so that they could get paid to solve it. That is the pattern. So maybe what we needed as a collective was a wake-up call so that we could stop being so gullible whenever we're told something. Things have to be exposed so that we can be proactive instead of reactive. The whole thing with all of this, even the undocumentation, the demanding that you prove who you are. Now, the next step is to suggest that you get a chip that they can just scan and show who you are. How many people are thinking that's probably a convenient thing? Duh. Okay, so everybody who knew this day was coming, they didn't know what was going to lead up to it.
Well, the
And now we
worst
see
part,
what's going to lead up to people consenting to this. So if you're
Well, not to be scary, but we've been reading about this in Revelation. All these things have been predicted for years before. And earlier, when you read these scriptures that talk about the end times and people getting the mark, and it just looked like so unreal. But you see how technology moves faster than we can even make a moral judgment on it. And everything is AI now.
So you're told the ending of a story, but you're not told all the things that happen before you get to the end. That's why you don't recognize it when you actually see the end of the story that you already were told about. So if we know this is what the plan is, everything that is foretold, that is a possible end. But there are always alternatives based on the decisions that we make.
That we make.
Proactive decisions. All of this can change for our betterment, but we have to be proactive. Things like taking control of your food supply that you eat. If people are poisoning your food and chemicalizing everything, take back your power, grow your own food. If you want to raise chickens, raise your chickens in a healthy environment. Feed them water that hasn't been polluted. All these other things that are happening that we're seeing right in front of our face and we're being set up. If we would stop giving away our power, then we would see that the world can change. But we got to stop being gullible and just swallowing everything we're told. And first of all, not reacting to everything, because nobody can put you in slavery without your consent. They cannot.
I just want us to get back to a little bit back to and reel us back into the whole immigration, because I want to bring up something when we had talked about fear, and I pulled this up because there was an 11-year-old girl who died by suicide in Texas just a couple of weeks ago. This was in Gainesville, Texas, and she died by suicide because she was being taunted about deportation. And this is the other thing that we need to think about when we're talking about, and Michelle, you had brought up how, if they go into the classrooms, they're traumatizing all
Other
the
children, all the children.
all the children. But I wanted to get your take on the whole thing of how children are being also, you know, because children are bullies, they can be horrible people when they are middle schoolers anyway. We all know that. Uh,
Yes.
but but the thing is that it becomes more serious if you have children who are being taunted to the point of where they are dying by suicide.
So
You know,
should
You
schools
know, I
have
think
some
we
kind of
have I think we have a problem period that the hate that has towards all sorts of people has become the norm, and it is okay to say things when you hate people or dislike people or have a bias against them, whether it's based on their race, their gender, their immigration status. And we have a whole generation of kids who are being raised where it's okay to bully kids who are different, right? And the school systems and the laws that are being implemented by this administration are basically saying you can't do anything. Now, I'm a lawyer. I would want school to sue the school system. I realize that's not always a practical or financial thing that you can do, but there have been lawsuits with kids who have committed suicide where the parents did sue the school system because the school system refused to act and the school system ended up having to pay. Now, I am sure every parent would prefer to have their kid than
right.
have to go through all of that. And the reality is there's not enough lawyers who specialize in that area that, can be successful in the school system with an administration that is coming down and, trying to destroy the Department of Education and destroy DEI and destroy all these things and taking books off the shelves. And basically, a lot of their laws or executive orders that they say are to make an even playing field, let's face it, it's a dog whistle to say we don't care what black and brown people and we can do whatever we want to do with them. So I think that this is going to affect not only the bullying and schools that are not doing anything. In fact, I got a call from it's a long story, but I got a call for a school in the Chicago suburbs recently. I got a call from somebody who just was made aware of a problem of a school in the Chicago suburbs where they're not dealing with the N-word. And these kids now think it's acceptable to go after the black kid and call him the N-word right and left, right? Because this is what we are seeing from the top. And don't even get me started on all the rapists and how the laws are changing to say, let's do the benefit of the doubt of the one that's accused that raped somebody as opposed to, the benefit of a doubt of the victim who got raped. But anyway, my point is we have a whole generation that is being allowed to witness bullying, is beginning to bully, and that generation eventually is going to grow up and they're going to go in the workforce. We're going to be hiring these kids,
Yes.
right? And there's this whole, some of these kids will obviously go the other way and they may be more compassionate because they've seen this. That's great. But I'm really worried about, we have a whole generation of kids growing up where it is acceptable to attack people for being who they are.
Well, I know we've got to go, but I think based on all that you've said and all that we have observed, that what's going to happen is that this generation that's witnessing this and growing up in this, I think they're the ones who are going to create the change because of what they see. And that's going to be the positive and the rainbow after the rain. I think that's what we're going to see because
Hoping.
the hatred has come to the surface so that we could see it, so that we could change
Right.
it. It was always there. We just needed to see it so that we could change the systems that held it up this long. That's my take on this.
Yeah.
So, well,
I think you're right that there were, it has come to the surface, but I do think that they are helping others come to their side of the hate that weren't aware of it before. Right.
Yeah.
So there's more than what was hiding underneath.
Well, it's not hidden anymore. It's in plain sight.
No, it's not. And I think actually that's one of the things that as a parent, or frankly, if you could do it as a teacher, which you really can't anymore, but if you are a parent, you should be able, you're going to have to teach your child how to navigate this overt racism.
Yeah.
this overt sexism, this overt homophobia, this overt Islamic phobia, this overt anti-Semitism. That is gonna, things that parents 20 years ago thought, ugh, I don't have to deal with this anymore. Guess what? It's back.
It's
Yes.
back. Well, before we go, Michelle, tell us how we can get in touch with you. If people want to get in touch with you and they feel like they need some help from you as a lawyer or attorney, how can they reach you?
Okay, so my law offices of Michelle M. Hughes is in Chicago, and my phone number is 312-857-7287. Or you can look for my website, and my email's on there. The email, I have multiple emails, HughesLaw@mindspring.com. And I am basically an adoption attorney or family building attorney. So I also do like surrogacy and egg donor and stuff like that. But if I don't know a particular area of law, or it's an area that I don't really practice in, and you are in the Chicago area, I may be able to refer you to somebody who does, because I do know a lot of lawyers.
All right.
But I have a very narrow, specialized field. I do not do divorce. Right?
All right.
I know divorce lawyers, but I do not do divorce. I know criminal defense lawyers, but I do not do criminal defense.
All right.
I know immigration lawyers. Lawyers are we do very specialized areas. So
yeah.
Yes. Well, if you need a lawyer, and she might refer you to the kind of lawyer you need, there you go. Hughes Law at mindspring.com. That's correct? All right.
That is correct. Yep.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. This has definitely been an eye-opening experience. Don't get afraid. Don't panic.
Yeah.
It's gonna get better, but we got to go through this. So
Help is out there.
Yes.
Make a plan.
Make a plan.
Make a
plan. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And until next week, we want to make sure, we thank you, and we'll probably have you back again. And we want to make sure our viewers remember to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get the notices every time we go live. And we will see you next week on Three Black Moms. And until that time, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. Thank you, Michelle. We are 4 Black moms.
Yes, we are.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black Moms.